So there's three main causes of hyperkalemia, which is an increase in potassium. And of course, hyperkalemia can be life-threatening as it can cause electrical abnormalities in your heart and can cause cardiac arrest, essentially. So the three main causes are decreased excretion. Of course, this is renal excretion. It can be caused by a shift from the intracellular fluid space to the extracellular fluid space. And then it can be due to increases in intake. And I'm not really going to go through this other than to say, so this could be something like fluids are administered that have too much potassium in them, or perhaps you bolus potassium-containing fluids, which would be bad. So let's go through each of these in a little bit more detail. So hyperkalemia due to, again, decreased renal excretion. This is our first cause. We're going to break this down a little bit more. So we can see this due to, let's do this, a lack of urine. So you can have a lack of urine because there's no production. And no production of urine is anuric or oliguric renal failure. So anuric or oliguric renal failure is a type of acute kidney injury leading to anuric or oliguric renal failure. Again, kidney injury doesn't always result in this. And you lose so many nephrons that you're not actually making any urine. So you're going to look for signs of acute kidney injury. So what are you going to look for? You're going to look for things like an azotemia. And depending on how much urine's being made, you may or may not have a urine-specific gravity. But if you do, you expect it to be a low urine-specific gravity. You might look for those specific casts, granular, cellular, waxy casts. You might look for evidence of proximal convoluted tubular injury, so maybe you're losing bicarbonate. Maybe you have glucose in your urine without a high glucose, so that could be euglycemic glucosuria. You're going to look for a reason. So did the animal get some sort of drug? Did it have a leptospira infection, recent anesthesia? Did it have a toxin exposure? And the big ones that we associate that we can actually diagnose through other things is ethylene glycol. Those are those adorable, oh my goodness, I cannot draw them, picket fence crystals. Vitamin D toxicosis, where you get very, 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 very high increases in calcium and phosphorus. We'll go through these later on. Oh, my handwriting's getting very bad. With vitamin D toxicosis, where you get mineralization. So look for lily exposure in kitties, lots of different things. So that would be anuric or oliguric renal failure. So that's our no production cause. So we're going to say A. And then B is going to be that you can't get urine out. So not getting urine out would be something like a uroabdomen. So you're making urine, but you just can't get it out of the body. So uroabdomen, and then urinary obstruction. And so uroabdomen, of course, you're going to look for an animal who has fluid in the belly. You're going to see a decrease in sodium and chloride potentially, maybe a history of trauma. Maybe they have, again, ascites or fluid. You're going to expect, of course, azotemia. And you may or may not get urine to have a urine-specific gravity, but of course the urine-specific gravity can be anything. If there's urine, it tends to be a very weak stream. So again, history. Urinary obstruction, of course, again, clinical signs, you're going to look for an animal maybe with stranguria. Sometimes they can have classic crystals. So the classic crystals that cause stones are uric acid crystals in Dalmatians and other dogs, and cysteine crystals in Newfoundlands and other dogs. Uric acid crystals are these kind of rhomboid shape. I don't know if I can actually make a rhomboid, that are kind of brownish gold, and cysteine are, it's like a six-sided stop sign. I'm not doing such a great job. But these actually form stones in acidic urine, and so you can see that. Male animals are going to be more likely to have a urinary obstruction from a stone than female animals are. The sodium and chloride can be anything, so that's not that helpful. Again, the urine-specific gravity is variable, but certainly an animal straining to urinate, some hematuria, And again, you're going to see azotemia, and we're going to call this post-renal. The lack of aldosterone, so is our second, so decreased renal excretion, so you have no aldosterone. And of course, that is from Addison's disease, which I'm not going to go through again. That is a terrible way to, there we go, lack of aldosterone again. And I went through that in the review video and previously, and we'll go through it again a little bit later. So if decreased renal excretion was, of course, our first, so we did decreased renal excretion by the kidney. Now we're going to do our intracellular to extracellular shift. So we see kind of a couple big things, and one of these is going to be acidemia. So remember, potassium normally lives in the cell. So with acidemia, acidemia means acidic blood. And so there's too many hydrogen ions, right? So let's draw some cells. Let's make some purple cells. So here's our purple cell. That's our intracellular space. And here's our potassium in our cell. I'm not doing so great with my potassium. There we go. Here's some potassium in our cell. But we have an animal who's acidotic, so he's got tons of hydrogen ions out here. And of course, tons of hydrogen ions lowers the pH. So we have a decrease in pH, and that means cell processes don't work as well. So the body wants to not have you be too acidemic. It also doesn't want to kill you with high potassium. So this is only going to mildly increase your potassium. And so you get a shift of hydrogen ion into the cell, and potassium now comes out of the cell. So this is going to cause a mild increase. It's not going to be life-threatening because, of course, you don't want to die from acidemia and die from hyperkalemia. So acidemia can cause this shift, hydrogen ion into the cell, potassium out of the cell. So again, you're going to look for a low blood pH if you have a blood gas, but what we're really going to look for is a decrease in TCO2, which is equivalent to bicarbonate, which is HCO3. So the other cause is muscle injury, primary cause anyway. And of course, muscles have a lot of potassium in them, and there's a lot of muscle in some of our bodies, not all of us. So muscles, of course, are very rich in potassium, right? So there's lots of potassium. Oh, I shouldn't change the color of my potassium. There we go. So there's lots of potassium in muscles. And there's also a lot of phosphorus in muscles. And there's a lot of phosphorus in muscles because it's a part of ATP. And so when you have muscle injury through a variety of things, so maybe exertional rhabdomyolysis, capsular rhabdomyolysis, heat stroke, lots of things can cause muscle injury. You see muscle death, and something in muscle called creatine kinase is released. And so what we do is we will see on our blood work increases in something called CK, and also an enzyme called AST, and that tells us that CK is very, very specific for muscles, so we look for that increase in CK, but you can also see increases in AST, and then what's rich in our intracellular space leaves because the cell has died, and so you're going to see increases in potassium, and you're going to see increases in phosphorus because, again, it's very rich in phosphorus. But this now dead space of the muscle, you can then also see decreases in sodium because sodium leaves the blood and goes into this dead space. And all of this, this phosphorus binds to calcium, and so calcium decreases. And those are less important, and we'll do this when we get to the enzyme section. So what are you going to look for? You're going to look for increases in CK and AST, an increase in potassium, and phosphorus. And we're going to see this more often in large animals than small. You can also see myoglobin in the urine, which looks a lot like hemoglobin, except the animal, you don't expect them to be anemic. And so myoglobin gives the urine kind of a brown color. And large animals, because they have so much more muscle, are kind of more at risk. So the last time that we kind of see this shift is animals that have a really, really, really high platelet count. So we're talking platelets greater than usually 600,000. And if you don't separate your blood right away. So this is in real life, we can see this. Or in vitro hemolysis in horses and essentially non-dogs, because their red cells have a lot of potassium, but not in dogs. And we're not going to really focus on this. I just give you that information so you know it.